Alright, in this clip, we are going to create a nice depth of field using a camera lens blur effect and the depth pass rendered in Arnold in the previous module. If you want to follow along, you can open the After Effects file m5_01 in the After Effects folder. Okay, first let's create a new adjustment layer. Let's go to the Layer menu, then New, then Adjustment Layer. Hitting the Enter key to rename this layer DOF for Depth of Field. This is the layer which will contain the blur effect. Next, let's go ahead and look for the camera lens blur in the Effects panel. When you found it, drag and drop it to the DOF adjustment layer. Great! Before going forward, let's just lock the two other layers just to be sure we won't mess with them. As you can see, the camera lens blur is already blurring the image. And this blur is pretty neat, as you can create realistic camera blur with it. You can increase the blur here with the blur radius control, and here you can choose the shape of your bokeh and here adjust it. If you go, for example, frame 23, I will boost the highlights momentarily to see a bit better some bokeh, and these controls here will tweak the shape of the blur. Well, here in my case, I'll reset the settings as I'll go with the default bokeh shape. Now, the really interesting part of this effect is this blur map here. Let me show you how it works. I will quickly create a solid with Ctrl Y or Command Y and apply a ramp effect on it. I will tweak just a little bit the ramp. Okay, now if I come inside the camera lens blur again, I can assign this layer to the effect. And now I need to select here Effects and Mask. Otherwise, the ramp I assigned on the solid wouldn't be active and wouldn't drive the blur here. Now, if I hide the ramp layer, you can see that my blur is applied where there is some white, but not where it's black. The cool thing as well is that with the blur focal distance here, I can adjust the position of my focus within this range between white and black. So, good! A ramp is useful to fake a depth of field. However, we have a depth pass just for that. And the depth pass is basically a black and white image we can use to drive this effect. So I'll delete my test layer and let's go to the project tab to grab the depth pass for camera 2. Just drag and drop camera 2Z in the composition. Now, I will need to adjust a little bit the depth map to work with. First, I will need to switch my project to 32-bit because this depth pass is a high dynamic range image which require linear values to work with. If you want to know more about AGR files, floating point values, and EXR, you can watch my course Nuke Rendering at Pluralsight. This course is about Nuke, but the concepts I'm talking about in the last module called Main File Types, Codecs and Compressions can be applied to any visual effects software. Okay, basically, if I'm hovering my mouse on the top of my image now, I don't have an integer value for each pixel, but a floating point value. And this floating point value is going above 1. This is extreme precision, and there is, as you can see, really high values. But I need to bring this image to look like more black and white 8-bit image to work with. So I will go under the Utility tab in the Effects panel and I will select a HDR Compender. Drag and drop this effect on the depth layer. This effect will allow me to compress the values of the high dynamic range image so these values fall within the range of a 8-bit image between 0 and 1. Of course, this reduces the precision of the image, so be careful with this tool, but here we have no choice. Make sure the mode is set to compress range, and then come over here and increase the gain. And here it is, we can see now our depth pass. Hooray! So basically here, whatever is black will be close to the camera, whatever is white will be far away from the camera. Of course, depending of the render engine you used, this may be inverted. However, we are not done yet. If you try to apply this layer as it is in the camera lens blur, it may work, but not completely. If you look at the sample here, we still have values above 1, and that may confuse the effect. So I could keep going and go till 50, for example, in the gain, to make sure high values are compressed enough, just to be sure there is no value above 1. Now we should be okay, as you can see. But to make sure I'm not doing anything wrong, I will drop here a HDR highlight compression effect. This effect will make sure my values are never going above 1. Now I can adjust the gain of the HDR compounder as I want. I can dial it down just to find the ramp I want. Well, let's apply the layer to the depth of field effects now to see how it works. Let's go at the end of the shot for that, around frame 130, and I will just hide that layer because, as we did with the test, we don't need him to be visible to work. I will go to my DOF layer and choose here the Camera 2Z layer for the blur map. Well, as you can see, the result looks a little bit weird, isn't it? After Effects doesn't like too much cutouts around objects if the distance values are too different. For example, the gramophones here and the background behind. For that to work properly, I should have rendered the background in the CG as well, but I didn't, so I will need to find another way around. Well, now that this is a regular black and white image, I can manage to tweak this to exaggerate the separation between black and white. And for that, let's put levels. First, let's go back quickly to the HDR compounder and reduce the value to have a better ramping of the depth. Now, by playing with the histograms of the levels, starting tweaking the input white values, I can really clamp the values and decide what is going to be in focus and what won't be in focus. I will create this kind of extreme map where only the close letters are in focus and everything else will be blurry. I will adjust a little bit the blacks and the middle tones as well to create the contrast. And now, because we set our project to 32 bits, the big changes we made to the levels can make the values go above 1 or below 0. So we need to enable the clipping for the white and black values down here. This will make sure the pixel values won't go above 1 or below 0. Now, if I hide my layer, I can see the effect of these changes, and the result is pretty cool. I'm going to scroll a little bit to see how it looks like. Frame 45, 46, yeah, looks great. Let's see around the end as well. Yeah, it looks cool. Now, I can switch the focus by changing the blur focal distance, like that. And I can even animate that control. Let's do it. We will change the focus when the second gramophone appears. So let's go around frame 70 when the first gramophone appears and click on the time watch up there to create a keyframe. And just make sure the blur focal distance value is set to 0 and then go around frame 80, 85 and set the value to 1. After Effects will create a new keyframe automatically at that time. Alright, let's have a look. I will reduce a little bit the work area just to cache around this transition. Awesome, isn't it? It really adds a lot to the shot. I told you in the previous module that I wanted to get the feeling of a micro shot. Well, a strong depth of field like that really helps this idea. Okay, last but not least, you can see that we have fading pixels around the border of the screen. To avoid that, you need to click on Repeat Edge Pixels down here. So unfortunately, the camera lens blur isn't perfect and it may create some artifacts. If you look around the beginning of the shot, you may have sometimes some kind of bleeding around the pieces. And to fix that, you will need to go ahead and animate your levels in there. But in this case here, I think that I can live with that, as it's moving pretty fast. If you want better results otherwise, I will recommend you to use some plugins like Frischluft Lens Care, which is offering amazing quality and great efficiency. Otherwise, Nuke is doing as well an amazing job, so if you want to have a look, watch next module as well. Alright, for now, I think this will do the job. So let's move on to the next clip to color correct the shot. See you there.